All right, I am delighted to welcome you to a panel discussion on Harmonizing with Tech and Product by Erin, Christina, Pooja, and Haley. Ladies, the floor is yours.
Thanks, Robin. Welcome everyone this afternoon to our panel discussion. We have some excellent panelists here to answer a few questions that I concocted, as well as questions from you all. It'll be pretty open format, more seminar style versus lecture. Won't have to worry about where the slides will be posted because we don't have slides. So we're excited to get this discussion going. So before I go any further, with all of us here, let's take a second. And if I could ask you to post, I know this is a little bit of a common kind of icebreaker, but post a word in the chat that explains something that came to mind when you read or hear that title, Harmonizing Tech and Product. It could be something that comes to mind on the subject, or how you feel reading that, harmonizing between tech and products. Just chat, put a couple words in the chat there. Oh, these are awesome. One team, hopeful, collaboration, alignment. Awesome. Just to kind of get our minds in this space. We've had a lot of great talks so far today. So to kick us off for this afternoon, transparency. That's a great one. Thinking about these two groups and how they interact. Awesome. So yeah, I think this is good, kind of setting the tone. The way it'll work today is we're gonna go through some introductions so you can get to know everyone. We'll have 3 topics of questions. The first will be focused on sort of conventional Agile teams, particularly conventional Scrum teams. Second topic is, you might have guessed, unconventional type Agile settings, or different styles of implementing Agile methodologies. And then the third topic is pretty general best practices amongst tech teams and product ownership, things like that. So I'll ask 2 to 3 questions in each of these topics to the panelists, and then at the end of each topic, we'll take a quick break and get some questions from the audience on that topic. If you have a really good question and it has nothing to do with the topic, even though they're pretty general, that's perfectly fine too. Like I said, this is meant to be pretty conversational, and we just want to dive into some of the intricacies between the relationships of product and tech folks. So I'm excited. This will be great. So everyone on this panel, I will say, is from Ippon Technologies, which is a small consulting company in Richmond and Scotts Addition. But each of us has had very unique experiences to get us where we are now. And one thing that's really cool about being in consulting is each of us on a day-to-day are in a completely different culture and environment, and have a lot of different challenges and experiences to share. So hoping today we can share that with you, talk a bit about how these 2 particular arms of software delivery work together. So let's go into intros and background without further ado. So I've asked everybody to go into some serious detail here with their background, because as we get into some of the more technical questions, I feel it's great to know where people are coming from, like what they're bringing to the table with their responses. You can get the most out of it knowing somebody's point of view and kind of like what they're optimizing for based on their experiences, which is kind of a theme of the whole talk today. So with that, let's start with our panelists, one and only Haley Ortega. You want to get us going here? And I'll go last.
Yeah. Hey, good afternoon, everybody. It's good to see some familiar faces and names. I'm happy to be here today at this great event. But yeah, a little bit of my background. So I'm the head of product here at Ippon USA. Right now, I'm actually doing product consulting for a fintech here in Richmond. And I'm also leading a product team of consultants and growing the business here at Ippon. So my background and how I got to where I am today. So I've been in financial services pretty much my whole career, mainly in the mortgage department and credit card lines of business. I started in sales and operations and then got into project management. And then with sort of the agile transformation, actually at Capital One, I got into product management, and I've been doing that over 6 years now. Worked on quite a few agile teams. And yeah, I think looking back at sort of my history of my career, one thing was kind of common. I was always a problem finder in a good way. So always kind of seeking out how things could be better or where there were process or problems in kind of the ecosystem, and then trying to drive change and solve those. And yeah, with product management now, I get to do that kind of day in and day out and partner with great engineers to solve very complicated problems. So happy to be here today to sort of share our experiences and hope you learn something today. I'll pass it over to Christina.
Hey everyone, I'm Christina Annis. I am a software engineering consultant with Ippon. And I've been here maybe almost a year and a half, not quite. And I was also recently promoted to manage people, so that's been a fun challenge. Currently, I'm on a project with an InsurTech working on kind of some risk analysis software that I'm getting a little bit into the data space, getting a little bit of a taste of that, which has been really fun. I've been in the industry for about 5 years, and my origin story starts at the University of Richmond. I was very interested in physics and math and computer science. So having all of those together and applied to science was really compelling to me, and also really taught me about how to communicate across disciplines and across people who kind of have different vocabularies, which has been very useful in my time in the industry. So after college, I went and worked for the Navy for a few years. I started doing testing for a very, very established old waterfall environment. And then I transitioned to doing some dev work in an agile environment, making simulation software. And while I was there, I kind of flexed to kind of a business analyst role and also kind of do a scrum master role. I loved doing all the different parts. And I think that's what I've kind of brought into consulting, is that ability to, one, the translation across disciplines and being able to understand people's motivations, and then also being able to kind of flex outside of my comfort zone and fulfill different roles. So anyways, Pooja, love to hear from you.
Hi, my name is Pooja Krishnan. I'm also a consultant at Ippon, but in the data practice. I've been with Ippon for nearly 2 years, and I'm currently doing data consulting for one of our fintech clients. I live in the suburbs of Washington, D.C., and I've basically known that I wanted to do something in the tech space since I was 8 or 9 years old. I used to love getting on the computer when I was in high school and when I was in school in general, and just being able to, when I was using the computer to either play games or do my homework, I really wanted to know what was going on under the hood, so to speak. So I basically went to VCU to study computer science. And in my career, I've basically been a consultant my whole career. I started out working for another consulting firm, and my first client there was with the Postal Service, actually. So I've done a lot of software engineering mostly in my career, and I just switched over and put on that data scientist hat. So I'm starting to explore that for one of our fintech clients that we're working for now.
Awesome. Thanks, everybody. And I'm Erin Geoghan. I'm a senior manager and software consultant at Ippon. I have worked on a variety of different projects over the last 6 years, mostly front end. I think JavaScript is kind of my go-to language. And in addition to kind of my main role as implementer, technologist, I've developed a passion for discovery and like this building up agile teams for success. I think that's like kind of a similar way Christina has led me to consulting and has propelled me in my recent roles as tech lead. I do love to code. I have a BS in mathematics, and like critical thinking is how I recharge. But on the flip side of that, I also captained the sports team in college, and I'm very team flow focused. I think that the bulk of my energy is channeled towards what kinds of like little tweaks and turns we can make on a human aspect to make a team go from 0 to high performing. I started out with Capital One for several years, and then I've been with Ippon for almost the last 3 years. My clients have been in healthcare and fintech for the most part. I recently played sort of a technical product owner role, and that is kind of what motivated me to put this panel together, get these folks from Ippon talking about our experiences, because I was brought to a realization that at times the worlds of product and tech can be at odds with each other instead of in unison. And I think that the relationship is fascinating, and it's a huge part of that like mojo of a team. So I'm excited to dive right into some questions. So again, yeah, we'll start off. Topic number 1 is focused on sort of conventional agile team setting or environment. And so this first question is on techniques for laying out a roadmap. So the scenario for this one is a new piece of intent comes in to your tech team. There isn't a very well-defined way of moving forward. Developers on the team would need quite a bit more clarity before they can really begin thinking of putting their hands on a keyboard. So in your all's roles, if you could share a technique or experience where you've been able to take maybe a pretty vague piece of business requirement and turn that into delivery. Can you share an experience like that with us here today? Haley, do you want to start with this one?
Sure, yeah, I'll go. So yeah, this is an interesting one, right? I think we often see product roadmaps, right? Once they've already been kind of developed and it's on a nice Google slide and it's just kind of a one pager with a bunch of big initiatives on it. It's like, okay, this is what we're doing. And, often we want to just pick something up and go and start building. But what I've found or learned is that it's really important to invest time up front in understanding like what you're solving for, why you're solving for it. So rather than just jumping right in and trying to go deliver immediately, what I like to do is what I call like a discovery sprint. And so that literally can just be 3 days, it can be up to 2 weeks. It's really depending on the size of the problem you're trying to solve. But what we do is come up with an agenda, figure out who the right people are to participate in the design sprint. And it's usually made up of product, designers, engineers, maybe customers or business stakeholders, right? And getting the right group of people all together at one time upfront to, again, get grounded on what are we solving for? What are the outcomes we're looking to achieve? What are the various scenarios we need to account for? The similarities, the differences, and like really kind of, again, do that discovery. And then basically the output of that will be kind of a blueprint, right? Or a backlog where you've broken down that large piece of work into multiple epics or phases, right? Where you then have a blueprint and you kind of are all grounded on what you're solving for, what you're going after, what those outcomes are. And then you can start to deliver, right, on that first piece, and then continue to kind of refine the rest of the pieces as you go. But again, I think it's really important, rather than just jumping in, to really kind of get together and understand the problem at hand and really what you're trying to solve for, and coming up with a plan. I'm a big planner. I come from a project management background as well. So I think it just, either you invest that time up front, or you spend that time swirling in your sprints trying to figure out what you're solving for. And at the end of the day, it could take even longer to deliver what you're planning on delivering. And it is just not as effective or fun, because again, you're swirling and being reactive rather than spending that upfront time investing in the problem.
Nice. Yeah, that makes sense. Any other thoughts?
Yeah, I'll jump in, Haley. I totally agree about getting people together up front. The particular thing that I'm thinking of is, Erin posed the question as kind of too big to start, but what I've seen is actually our users knew our product really well, and they kind of did the refinement for us before it even got to us. So they were like very specific about like, oh, we need this piece to change. And then we would change that, and then we would give it back to them, several months later, and they would be like, this doesn't get us where we need to go. And so the change that we had to make was, kind of walking our users back into the problem space and making sure that we really understood it there. And then, maybe they were right about the solution and maybe they weren't. So making sure that we had the right solution that they would then be able to run with once it was done. Yeah.
Interesting. Kind of roll it back a little bit, rein them in to make sure you spend enough time in that unknown, hairy stage.
Reining it in sounds exactly right.
Yeah. Any thoughts, Pooja, on this one from you?
Yeah, from a data standpoint, especially, I've found it instrumental once you have the key stakeholders, like Haley said, and like Christina said, and having that upfront meeting. I also think it's really important to figure out what exactly the flow of the data is. We need to have a clear idea of what that data flow is going to look like from end to end, especially focused on what kind of processing steps will need to be taken on a business level, because basically that's kind of the key information that you need when you're trying to start building out your stories, building out your feature level intent. And this is vital, especially if the feature is being inserted in the midpoint of a current application where you're doing processing and you want to insert new processing into the middle. And it's even more vital if you're going to bring in a new data source of some sort into your processing pipeline.
That sounds like awesome advice, especially on a data intent that you might be a little bit vague up front. You definitely have some things you need to get figured out before you can start working.
Sorry, I dropped my AirPod, my bad. I was just going to say, Pooja, I love where you mentioned process steps, because I think that's really important too, is sometimes your team might just be building a piece of a larger process. And so really laying out all the process steps in a particular flow is really important to know where your part fits in and be able to identify those upstream, downstream dependencies. And then also it's just a really good agile way of thinking about how to then break up the work, right? Like one of the methods we use is breaking it up by process step. So I really like that you called out that it's important to understand and do the discovery there.
Yeah, definitely. Thank you. All right. If I had to add a little bit onto this too, these are all good points. Something a little like slightly different is from looking back outwards, I guess, maybe a little similar to what you were saying, Christina, but my biggest question is always like why, especially when it's a piece of intent that yeah, where we aren't exactly sure what the outcomes are going to be. In defining those outcomes, the question I always ask is why? Because I think from designing on a technical standpoint, I want to know, like, okay, well, why is it you want X, Y, or Z? Like, let's make sure we're aligned on the same why, and setting those like metrics up to succeed. Okay, let's move on here to a question around everybody's favorite ceremony here, I'm sure, refinement, or maybe not, but it's got to be up there. So for this group, what are your top 2 tenets that you take with you to ensure you're going to have a successful refinement session? It can be anything, you know, in the delivery life cycle, but just across the board, what are your top 2 things that you need to have a successful refinement? Anybody can jump in to go first here.
I'll jump in if that's okay, because refinement is my favorite ceremony.
Yeah.
It's the most exhausting ceremony because
Yes.
it takes so much brain power, but if you do this right, the quality of your product will be better, your planning sessions will be a breeze, and things just go much smoother. But I know as a product manager, a lot of prep goes into a good refinement session for me. So what I like to do, right, is I'm looking at the backlog ahead of the refinement session. I'm prioritizing the stories or thinking about what is next, what we learned from the prior sprint, like what do we need to do next? And then I'm spending time drafting the acceptance criteria ahead of time and really, again, doing that creative heads down time thinking of like, what are all the scenarios related to this story, happy path, sad path, just doing really deep thinking and writing that acceptance criteria. And then I'm also looking at, okay, for this set of stories, are there additional stakeholders that we need to engage for the refinement for it to be effective and for there to be less like takeaways or action items? Like I want real-time decisions being made in the refinement session and questions to be able to be answered. So that might mean that I'm pulling in a designer. If they're UI stories, I might be bringing in a business expert if it's related to a certain part of the process, and so on. And then yeah, it's during the session, right, just working with the team to go over the acceptance criteria, tweak it, break up the stories maybe a little bit differently, account for acceptance criteria that I couldn't think of because of course I'm one person, I can't think of every single scenario, and it's really important that, you know, the team has input into all of that. So yeah, I guess for me it's very I do a lot of prep work. I like it to be organized. I want them to be productive sessions to get the most out of them. Looks like you don't have a work address listed. Sorry. And yeah, and again, I think when you're doing refinement, if you're starting something new, you know, you might need 2 or 3 refinements in a week. If you are working on something that you've been steadily working on, you might just be once a week. But I think as a team, you can kind of decide how much you need depending on how well groomed your backlog is or how well known the next set of stories are that you're working on. So yeah, hopefully that's helpful.
I think, yeah, it might have been 4 or 5 tenets, but that's what I would have expected from you. Yeah, that the prep work sounds like that's kind of your go-to piece, and then ensuring that the right stakeholders are at the meeting, and just doing what's right. It's not like not letting the meeting kind of slide by, but having it be like an active session. Actually, you want to like drive not delivery results, but results of a healthy backlog is your metric for a refinement, kind of treating it like that. Pooja, Christina, any other thoughts from you guys on refinement sessions?
Yeah, again, from a data standpoint, I
Yeah.
look for two things. First being quorum of understanding between your product owner, your tech lead, all of your tech resources, which are 90% of the time developers, as to what your features will entail, specifically looking at your transformations, your calculations, any kind of those process steps that Haley and I were talking about in the earlier question. And with a particular focus on what data is needed and why or how it'll be used. Because if, for example, your data is going to be consumed by a BI analyst or a data analyst of some sort, you need to know exactly what they're looking for so you can provide all the data points to them so that if they're building their reports, they have everything they need. And then the second thing is I honestly would like scheduling follow-up sessions for anything that's purely tech related. Having some sort of tech only meeting where you can go through and actually pinpoint exactly what the different tech involved steps are so that we can accomplish what the product needs at the end of the day when we have a full understanding of the business intent.
That's interesting. So a technical, so in addition to what Haley's talking about, you've found success with sort of a technical planning or refinement or something along those lines. Christina, have you done anything like that on your tech teams?
Yes, actually. So I was just thinking like my approach to this question is kind of backwards, just like it was for the last question. But my thing to share is actually a pet peeve, and that's when you kind of get siloed where like one person is responsible for one domain and you stay just ingrained in that. And one of the solutions I was going to provide for that is tech refinement. I think it's super useful for sharing that knowledge that might not be exactly entirely common along the tech team at the end of normal refinement. And you don't want to waste your stakeholders' time, but you do want to make sure that everybody's on the same playing field. So that's one of the techniques that I've seen used. And another one is kind of a merge review. So it's more kind of on the end of instead of at the beginning before you start the work, it's kind of at the end saying, this is how I approached this. This is what I did. If you really are kind of more entrenched in those domains, but you want to move towards having common understanding of the different components. I found that really useful to just kind of walk through all the changes that were made and why and how, especially if you're trying to mentor less familiar team members.
Yeah, yeah, that definitely makes sense. Sounds very useful. All right, our third Agile question before we take one from everybody in the audience is on the last line of our Agile Manifesto. So responding to change over following a plan. So of course, you have to be able to deliver small pieces of code quickly. That's a tenet of being on an Agile team. But sometimes to create an architecture from a technical perspective, you have to think of some big things up front, and it can't just be like little pieces at a time, getting small pieces at a time, or not having big pictures. So how do you guys feel that the product team can work with the development team to strike that balance between responding to change and still ensuring the team has enough lead time to deliver well-designed code?
I just want to jump in and kind of give some context because I've worked in a waterfall environment that like the same project had evolved from before waterfall. And like it just really helped me to see that and to understand that these people who instituted kind of a waterfall process were solving a problem. And the problem that they had was that there was no plan at all. And then like you would build something and then you would test it and then you would change something else that changed it and you wouldn't test it and then you'd be in a mess. And so then waterfall solves that problem by creating a lot more process around it. And so I think with that in mind, it's not going back to the era of not ever having a plan. It's just valuing, we know that the plan probably is going to have to change. How do we set ourselves up for success in an environment where we need a plan, but we need a plan that is flexible and can adapt as circumstances change, as they undoubtedly will. But I don't have anything, beyond that, useful like suggestions. So I'll let Haley step in.
Yeah, I don't have a whole lot more, but I think to your point, like it is a very common misconception that there's no plan or no dates in Agile. Like I've seen it from both sides, you know, like business stakeholders saying, "Oh, you guys don't have a plan, you can't give me a, you know, a go live date." I've also seen where engineers have been like, "Oh, you can't give us dates we have to hit because we're Agile," right? Like those are extremes, but I've seen it. You know, I think that there are definitely a lot of misconceptions, but like to Christina's point, it's about being Agile, right? Being flexible. You have a plan. I think, right, your near-term plan is pretty solid. You know, you should know your dates over the next 2 weeks, a month, etc. But the dates that are further out are definitely less or more unknown, right? And you'll need to figure that out as you get closer. And you don't want to give too specific of dates, right? Because it could change, right? Depending on what you learn from what you just released, you're going to make changes, and then you're going to have to size that and reevaluate your dates for that next kind of release. So yeah, it's about being flexible and responding to customer feedback, right? And delivering value. So it's less about dates; it's more about delivering value quickly and responding to that.
Yeah, and I was gonna say, like, from the product presence of here's what will bring value, like the challenge on the product side is getting that, here's what will bring value. And this sprint, here's what will bring value. Here's this sprint, here's what will bring value. And on the tech side, knowing when to draw the line at, okay, that's enough details for us to know. I can make an educated guess now as to like when this will be ready. I don't need to fully do every little piece of work. So that's, and it's an art form on both sides, like that balancing act of when do you draw the line and say, okay, I know enough, I've done enough thinking about this, we can kind of project this date and then work through those details, like in the day-to-day nitty-gritty. Yes, definitely.
Yeah. And Erin, I think a good point, right, is value is the key, right? And also having a sense of how much time you're willing to invest in that thing to get that value is really important. So it is an art. And you do need to be thinking about dates and timelines because again, you should have an idea of, hey, this investment or value I'm going to get is worth about this much. Therefore, I should be spending about this much time. And if it looks like it's going to go way over that, it's time to reevaluate, right? So yeah.
And that changes team to team, human to human. Like that's what I love about that too. Like what one team thinks is going to take this amount of time for them to get through is going to be different from another team. And that's what is fun and unique about like getting a team to be high performing. It doesn't look the same for everyone. It's very different. And having an open line of communication. It's like, here's where we are with this. What's the input from the product side? Like bringing those two representations is like to the table is important.
Yeah, and you shouldn't be afraid to say, sorry, Pooja.
No, go ahead.
Cut you off. I was just going to say, and you shouldn't, those constant check-ins are important, and you should not be afraid to say, okay, this is not working. You know, let's not go any further. We might just decide to stop or pivot to a totally different direction. And it doesn't feel great, but that's okay. And it's better than continuing on with something that you know is not valuable or not worth it. So yeah, having that open communication about where we are with things is really important. Pooja.
Yeah, and for things that I've seen happen all the time is with data. I've had the data that we're either inputting into the system as a source or outputting, needing that to change at any time. And at that point in time, I found it really useful to talk to my product owner and figure out what the actual priority for those changes are. Obviously, the change may have needed to be made yesterday in terms of what either our source or our destination team needs, but we also need to keep in mind all the work that we're already currently doing in a sprint. And at that point in time, talking to the product owner about priority has been really useful in that aspect.
Yeah, yeah, that makes a lot of sense. So we'll pause here for a minute before we talk about some other kind of non necessarily Scrum type situations. Does anyone have any questions or further comments that they want to add to our talk right now? Any questions for us on our experiences, challenges you might have currently or have seen that you just want another, we've got these set of people to provide some insight on. If anyone has any questions they want to bring up, you can post it in the chat or direct chat it to Robin as well too, if you want it to be anonymous.
Absolutely, happy to help.
I have a question. This is Sam Ostrich. At what stage, I'm a software engineer at Capital One. At what stage do you think it's appropriate to bring in tech when you are delivering new intent? Something that we're struggling with at my current project, we've got like the 20,000 foot view and then basically telling us to run with it when I feel like I need a little bit more. So I'm just interested if you guys have faced that or what your viewpoint on that is.
Yeah, that's a great question. Haley, you were nodding. Do you want to start out on that?
Yeah, and I'm sure you have some comments too, Erin, from your experience. It's like everything in art, but I think what I try and do personally, like as a product manager, is once I do a couple initial interviews and try and get my own general understanding of what and why we're doing this thing. And it, could just take a couple meetings to kind of get there. But then I pretty much very quickly bring in at least the tech lead for my team, because I think it's important for them to have the same context from the beginning, and meeting directly with the users or the intent owners on like what we're going after. So oftentimes it's me having a couple meetings, getting my general understanding, so I'm not totally blind about what it is, and then bringing in my tech lead, and there'll be a series more of meetings and sort of interviews to dive in and try and understand it. And then we start to bring in the team for, say, like a design sprint to share kind of the big picture and break it down, or start to bring it into refinement. But that's kind of the process that I use.
Yeah, I agree with that as well. And like thinking of timing on that, right? Like the tech lead and the product manager, product owner, like should be a sprint, at least a sprint, probably a couple if it's a big project coming up ahead of the team. So like you want to be, there's like thinking iceberg model too, right? Like there's going to be some stuff at the bottom of your backlog that's just like that. Yeah, like you said, the 20,000 foot view at the moment, but it's like up to the tech lead and product partnership to get that kind of ready. Meanwhile, team doesn't really need to, like, if they're still delivering on something, or maybe you've identified some areas that you can do some like POC or innovation type that you might not know the exact product details, but you can say like, oh, we're gonna need something like this, like team, go dabble in this area, and like that can also kind of shoot back up and help us with the defining like what this thing's gonna look like. I don't know, Pooja or Christine, if you had any other thoughts on that.
Yeah, teams that I've been in the past have definitely used spike stories, just like Erin mentioned, to look into possible tech solution for this problem, and just look at the feasibility of it. How easy is it to set up? What our like level of effort would be in order to get started with this new tool or new technique, and then run with it.
Hopefully that helped, Sam. Thanks for the question.
Yeah, thank you.
Sorry, I was going to say one more thing. Sam, just another like idea or thing is, it doesn't always have to be the tech lead doing the discovery. So I've also just asked who's interested, kind of in the team of partnering with me on XYZ next thing. And then it kind of lets them, be empowered to be a leader or to be an expert in a certain area of the product. So it's also, I think, okay to kind of mix up that responsibility a little bit. But I think all in all, it's important to have at least one, engineer along with the product manager doing that discovery and trying to not totally distract the whole team from what they're delivering, and then bringing them in when there's enough definition for it to be valuable for the team.
Yeah, cool. I like that. Haven't thought of that. Thank you.
Yeah. All right. Let's go ahead and move into the next topic here, which is sort of some experiences outside of a typical Scrum team setup. So I'm gonna kind of combine two questions here since we've had some great discussion so far today, but I will definitely want to hear from Pooja on this, because sometimes data projects in general sometimes take on a little bit of a different flavor when it comes to Agile delivery. So whether it is a data project, Pooja, if you'd love to talk about that, that would be great, or any other setting. I know I've been in some experiences that have had a non-traditional sort of Scrum team setup, but still like following some of Agile methodologies. So what situations have you been in like that, and what were some keys that, like some key takeaways to still having a high performing team, feeling like you're in that groove and delivering well without friction, that you can share with the group?
Yeah, so sinking right into that data world. Right now in my current project that I'm on right now, there has been kind of like a single product owner for our entire almost arc of the company that's doing this data analysis. So I don't have that direct one-to-one relationship with my product owner like I always thought I'd have, and that I did have when I was working on the traditional Agile Scrum projects that I have in the past. So all of our intent has kind of been coming from once weekly. They have all the tech leads, they have that refinement session with the product owner, and that's when they do their refinement. That's when they do their prioritization. And then they get put into our Kanban backlog. And from there, it's kind of like conversations between me doing the development and then my tech lead to actually do that further technical refinement, talk to any data analysts that need to be pulling in the work that we're doing, and go from there.
Awesome. Yeah, that's certainly a little bit more different. So like what are your what do your refinement sessions kind of look like right now in this model?
So basically for each ticket that I pick up, we have a daily 15-minute meeting, which basically functions as refinement.
Okay.
So as I pick up a new ticket, that's when I'll talk to the tech lead. It's basically myself, my tech lead, and then the data analyst is going to be picking up the results and the outputs of my work. And that'll be where we talk through what exactly needs to get done on the ticket, what I'll need to implement at a high level, and also get in the input from my data analyst. And that's when he'll go and say, okay, yeah, I have exactly what I need from what you're doing for this particular task, or no, I need something more.
Yeah, interesting. So it's very, even though you don't have a personal product owner you're interacting with, it's on the daily, you're getting kind of like input and feedback, which I think can be good and also potentially be stressful in some situations if you don't have that time up front to do sort of a sprint planning, and then you can run off. It's sort of a daily kind of check-in. So probably you're seeing some pros and cons to that type of model.
Yeah, mostly pros so far, but my team is also tiny. It's basically the tech lead, me, and then our data analyst.
Yeah.
So it's just the three of us. So that's cool. The small size of the team has helped mitigate a lot of those cons. I I don't know how it would work if there were 5 or 6 of us developers. And
Yeah.
I'm pretty sure that 15-minute meeting would no longer suffice if all of us are picking up different tickets. It definitely would not, because I know that we've definitely spent over 15 minutes talking about just the one ticket that I'm looking at. So
that's interesting that the team size plays a big role in how you can, what defines like a high performing team there. That's interesting. Anyone else have any other?
Yeah, I'd love to. I've been in a couple of situations like this. One, just our product owner was so overloaded with other kinds of work that she was supposed to be doing that she didn't have a lot of time. And so other team members really had to step up and help her. So what I learned from that is when you don't have a product owner, you have to kind of flex and really be supportive of that. And then another situation is just kind of there was no product owner. So we had work coming in from different directions and in a larger team than Pooja was mentioning. So I think it could have worked at like 3. But what I'm observing on this team is you have to do a lot more communication amongst the team because there isn't kind of a funnel. So you have to like field it and then communicate about it and then field it from another direction and communicate about it. And then that also means that you have to be more proactive about reaching out to stakeholders because there's, again, not kind of a built-in liaison to them. So you have to go find the users. You have to go find who cares about your end result, right? Because that's not doing.
Interesting. Yeah, your team is kind of absorbing the role.
Exactly.
Spread across. Yeah,
Right.
Distributed product manager.
It's not optimal, I would say.
That's good.
That's
interesting. Go ahead.
Yeah, I was just gonna say, it's not ideal. It's probably really good experience for you all because you kind of get to see what goes into the role or have that appreciation for it. But yeah, like you said, not ideal, right? Because then you are not able to spend time actually developing the solution because it does take a lot of work, right? For that stakeholder communication and planning for what's next and prioritizing that against all the various requests you're getting. So I'm sure that is slowing you all down a little bit and you'd probably be able to deliver more and be a little less stressed out if you had kind of a dedicated person or product manager doing that. So yeah, I think, and what I've seen too is you can have products with multiple, be building something that has multiple product managers that are stakeholders for it as well, which can get difficult. And what I found is you just kind of have to pick a lead team or a lead product manager that collaborates with the others so that there is still that single decider at the end of the day. Like, you know, it's kind of tried and true framework of like it's better when there's a single decider at the end of the day. It's makes it clear for the team of who to go to, or at the end of the day, who's actually making the decision when there is kind of a tie. So I think that's really, really important. And hopefully when that's the situation, the product managers are able to kind of work together, but at the end of the day, say, okay, you can be the kind of final decision maker for this. I think it's more successful that way.
Yeah, that's great. Great input. Awesome. Okay, we are gonna skip ahead to do a question, our last question, and then see if there's any other questions from the group before we wrap up for today. So thanks for all the input, you guys. This is sort of a open-ended question to leave us off on. From your experiences, sort of a word to the wise, like if people left this session with one thing to hold on to regarding this like great relationship between product and tech and how to make that successful, how to have a high performing team with that in mind, like what would be your one thing that you would leave the group with? Anybody can start.
Yeah, so I can. And my word for the wise is for the more technically inclined folks for us. So all of you software developers out there, for software engineers, as you all know, there are a billion different tools on the marketplace right now that we can use to form a solution for whatever particular problem you're trying to solve. And in my career, I've been in that position where I can recommend a tool to a tech lead or a product owner, which I think would best suit the problem we have to solve. The first time that I did this, though, my proposal ended up being out of budget or too complex to implement on my current tech stack. And I definitely could have avoided having that kind of embarrassing situation where I proposed something and it just kind of got shut down immediately if I had taken a step back and spoken to my product person. And basically you know that you have to optimize what your solution for your problem to the tech that you have. But I also would suggest not hesitating to bring forward any ideas that you have to your product owner, because then you can formulate a well-architected solution for the problem you're trying to solve.
Awesome. Thanks, Pooja.
So kind of, I was
Yeah.
gonna say, it might be cliche, but communication is key. So like, I think my biggest piece of advice is like communicate early and often, both like as a team and with stakeholders, right? So like as we are working together on a product, right? The scope is going to evolve. You're going to find issues that you didn't know were there as you dig in and kind of learn more. But I think it's really important to just talk about them, right? Like have an open relationship with, as a team, and bring that to your product manager and be like, and to the team and be like, hey, I found this, I'm struggling with this. Can we work through it? Or no, is this a real issue that we need to talk about our approach in making a major change, right? Or trading something off. And product manager might be like, okay, well, it's not worth it. Like, let's not do that right now, or let's move forward. We need to. And then communicating that to stakeholders as those things are happening and changing, so that they're constantly in the know about what's going on with the product, what's going to be delivered at the end of the day. So there's no like unpleasant surprises. I think what I've learned is stakeholders would rather know the bad news now, like when we know about it, than for us to kind of, be internally trying to figure it out as a team. And then at the end, or, they not get the product they thought they were going to get. It's better to kind of bring it up early and talk through it and figure out what we can do to solve it, or what the next steps are. So communication is key.
Awesome. Thanks, Christina.
Yeah, I'll follow Pooja's lead and share a tip for the technical side. I think it's important to be able to work with people to kind of be able to empathize with them. And one thing that really shifted my understanding of the product role was really getting prioritization, because it's not just linear, like this is important and this isn't important. It's balancing different timelines and like regulatory and legal concerns, and also, things that will impact performance or usability, but might not add a new feature. Like they have all of this going on in their brain, and they have to be making trade-offs between all of these different concerns. And I was just a lot more empathetic towards my product people when I recognized that, and I recommend it.
Yeah, prioritization is certainly not linear. Awesome. And my wrap up with this is taking us back to the refinement, but that can be such a hard meeting. So my takeaway is not only to come to refinement with energy, but also to the Agile delivery lead, Scrum Master, product and technologists, make refinement an energetic thing. It's not somewhere to go and sit and listen. I worked with someone who she started every refinement with, okay, I want to see your faces, who's got their water, you got your coffee, are we ready to go? This is an activity. It is not a meeting. And that I try to have that kind of energy on the teams that I'm on, and it just makes it a lot more fun and puts you in the right headspace, and I think you get a much more successful product in the end.
That's awesome.
Thanks. All right, So that's everything I have. We're like just about up on time, but if anyone did have anything real quick, and if you had the question that just one of us can answer or anything like that, feel free to just pop up and ask or toss it in the chat.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Well, I certainly want to thank you, ladies, for a wonderful presentation, a wonderful panel discussion. Hopefully everyone was able to glean a lot from this discussion and take this back to your workplaces and make immediate use.
Thank you. We're happy to be here.
And if you have any more questions, we do have some more time.
Yeah, we're hanging out.
Just to give everyone a moment to think. Up next on channel 1 will be Mike Kottmeyer, and I see Mike out there. Welcome back to the Agile Richmond community, Mike, and to miniVAte. On channel 2, we have Dean Schuster, and on channel 3, Nicole Spence-Goon. So certainly we'd love to have you here, and but we also have other talks in progress. So all of these talks will be available to you after the conference. It's Agile Richmond's gift to the community. So hope that you make use of everything that we had to offer today.